Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Channel Anime, the anime review show. I'm John. This week, an anime that shows a great deal of promise, but unfortunately tries to do a bit too much. I'm talking about Arpeggio of Blue Steel. Based on the manga of the same name and set in 2056, 17 years after much of the world's landmasses have been submerged due to global warming, and most of the Earth's naval forces have been decimated by a mysterious and technologically advanced enemy called the Fog, Arpeggio of Blue Steel focuses on the crew of the I-401, aka the Blue Steel, a Fog submarine that had been captured by the Japanese Navy, and then commandeered by naval cadet Gunzo Chihaya. At the start of the series, and even though they're still considered fugitives by the Japanese government, the crew of the Blue Steel are hired to transport a prototype weapon to the US, where it can be mass-produced in order to defeat the Fog and save humanity. Now moving on to the characters, of course we have Gunzo, the captain of the Blue Steel, Iona, the Blue Steel's mental model, or AI avatar, and of course the crew of the Blue Steel, so the first mate who always wears a helmet due to allergies, Kyohei, the weapons officer, Iori, the engineer, and Shizuka, the sonar operator. There's also Hyuga, a former Fog mental model who, after losing a battle with the Blue Steel, began working for Gunzo, Kamagagi, the Assistant Secretary of Military Affairs who hired the Blue Steel to take the weapon to the US, Kungo, the second in command of the Fog, also the main villain through most of the series, Haruna and Kirishima, Fog mental models who end up protecting a genetically engineered human, and Takao, a Fog mental model who, after losing a battle with the Blue Steel, decides that she wants Gunzo to be her captain. Now, Arpeggio of Blue Steel is a series that seems to borrow from a lot of other franchises, particularly Space Battleship Yamato, which also has a very similar plot. In fact, the supreme flagship of the Fog and the one who gave them the ability to develop mental models is called the Yamato. The Fog ship Nagara is equipped with wave motion compulsory conversion armor, and the super gravity cannon is basically the wave motion gun. Now moving away from Space Battleship Yamato, the Fog's curiosity about being human reminds me a lot of Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, and the Cylons from the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. And Iori, the Blue Steel's engineer, reminds me a lot of Kaylee from Firefly. Now, of course, starting with the positives, the show does a great job of mixing CGI with more traditional-looking animation. The introduction of Iona and the fact that she ends up being a hero was a very nice surprise. Episode 2 was the classic tense sub-battle, and while it was a bit cliché, it was very nicely done, and I'm glad they got it out of the way early. The dry dock sequence in Episode 3 was really well done, and surprisingly interesting for something that I'd think would be very boring. Also in Episode 3, Iona questioning the meaning of honoring the dead was a very nice touch, as was Gunzo's response that it helps the living move on, but really has no inherent meaning. I also really liked the explanation for why the Fog are using human bodies. The show also has some really great philosophical aspects, and the Fog are a great device for exploring human nature. I also found it very interesting that the Fog are studying humans in order to better understand themselves. It's suggested that they don't know their origin. It's also nice to see the sci-fi Navy concept, which has been done a lot, kept on Earth but still remain science fiction. Makie's story was a great departure from the action, and her true identity was a big surprise that made her story all the more touching. Also, Episode 6 was a very nice dark turn for the series. I liked that it was uncertain whether Haruna was protecting Makie for military reasons or because she actually cared about her. I also liked the suggestion that Haruna was developing a conscience because of her relationship with Makie, and that it was getting in the way of her fulfilling her function as a weapon. Kirishima fighting off the soldiers in the body of a teddy bear reminded me a lot of Yoda from the prequels, and it was very cool. And the departure into super deformed comedy in Episode 7 was a nice change of pace, at first. And I really like the explanation for why all of the Fog mental models are female, and how the prototype weapon works. It was great to have another tense sub-battle at the end of Episode 9 after all of the silliness of the previous episodes. And Episode 10 features a very surprising and touching death, and ends with a great twist. Now, of course, the cons. I think that they probably could have come up with a better name for the enemy than the Fleet of Fog. And I wasn't sure if the Fog mental models were mechanical or biological until halfway through the series. The fact that Iona is an attractive female who only exists to serve the young male protagonist is an obvious power fantasy. And that couldn't have been made more obvious when she told Gunzo to, quote-unquote, come aboard me. Iona showing up at the end of Episode 4, while it made sense, was a bit of a deus ex machina. And my big problem. Starting with Episode 4 and going through most of Episode 9, there is a lot of fan service, and it gets really haremy. Now granted, all of that nonsense ends at the end of Episode 9, but it still really marred the series for me. Arpeggio of Blue Steel started off really strong. And even through Episode 5, I thought that it could be the new Space Battleship Yamato, with aspects of Evangelion and even Serial Experiments Lain thrown in, and it's certainly trying to be all of that. But Episodes 7 and 8 just made it seem like they're trying too hard to appeal to everyone. And it just seemed so unnecessary when the series was already brilliant to begin with. Now granted, they do seem to be getting back on course, but I just wish that they hadn't gone there in the first place. Alright, that's it for Arpeggio of Blue Steel. Until next time, when I'll be taking a look at Tokyo Godfathers. Take a look down in the description, and you'll find a link to Arpeggio of Blue Steel on Crunchyroll, links to find the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, links to my anime list and Crunchyroll profiles, and of course a link to Zombie Takeout, the Being Called Movie Review podcast that I co-host and produce. Also, if you like this video, please click the like button, and if you'd like to see more, please subscribe. And until next week, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later. And most of the world's...